Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Right Word Podcast. My name is N.N. Shepherd. I'm joined with Josiah Furcinitti here.
What's going on, everybody?
This is a podcast where we talk about writing, the craft of writing, books, reading, marketing, indie publishing, just the whole gamut of everything involved with the written word.
Including occasionally Stephen King.
Absolutely. Hopefully more than occasionally.
Hopefully. We'll
see.
strive towards that goal. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So today we are going to be talking about, for you horror fans out there, one of the scariest things in the life of a writer, the dreaded writer's block.
Terrifying.
Horrifying.
It's the end of your, any momentum that you have, that thing that you hit, and it just stops you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like that wall in Harry Potter. If it never turned into that magical portal, you just hit it and your nose breaks. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
I haven't read Harry Potter, so I'm really spitballing here.
No, that's spot on.
I think that's a thing. Okay, good. Well, before we dive in here, N.N. Shepherd, tell me a little about yourself. How'd you get into writing? What does writing look like for you? What do you like to write?
Yeah, I would say I kind of started when I was in my middle school years, preteens, writing just little short, westerns or spy stories on paper and things that my mom could read and say, "Oh, this is something," And then that grew into, I think I wrote my first full length 100,000 plus fantasy novel when I was 18 or 19, maybe earlier than that, somewhere in that late teens age. And then from then on, I've written maybe half a dozen full length novels, a bunch of short stories, nothing published yet. But I've set things out and I've gone through the querying process to some degree with several different projects. And, fantasy, science fiction, those are kind of my main genres that I like to write in. I like to read primarily. I've done a little bit of the spookier stuff, a little bit of horror, but it's not as natural to me as science fiction, fantasy. So that's kind of where I'm at with my journey. I'm trying to work on the social media aspect of things and do some more marketing, some self-marketing to hopefully gain a little bit of a following, a community to talk about stories and books, and then, maybe be attractive to potential publishers in the future. How about you, Josiah?
Yeah, for myself, I had kind of always wanted to write. Like as a kid, I really enjoyed school assignments where I could write my own stories and stuff like that. As a young adult, I saw Stephen King's It, the new movie they made, and then I went back and read the source material, and I was like, this is phenomenal, and I want to do this. So from that point, I started really wanting to write a little bit more. But for whatever reason, whenever I sat down, it was just like prose and maybe the start of a story, but I was never able to finish anything. Long story short, a couple of years ago, I met the woman who is now my wife. And as we started to get to know each other, I don't know, whatever it was, she's my muse. My inspiration began to grow, and I finally started writing. I wrote a short story, then another, and then a novel, and then I've written probably a dozen short stories since. So far, it's all horror. Which is super ironic because my wife despises horror. She doesn't read anything or watch anything with any kind of scare. So my goal, actually one of my goals this year as a writer, is to write something not scary that she and my family can read. So,
well, that's sweet. That's fun to have that person that you can look to and go, oh, this, maybe there's something, the timelines kind of met at the same time, and you can, put her in your forward or your, to my wife, my muse, that kind of cute thing at the beginning of a book.
Yep, definitely one of those writers where when they write, I couldn't have done this without my wife. I feel like literally I probably could not have done it.
That's awesome.
So that's
cool.
Awesome. So diving into writer's block. N.N. Shepherd, what is writer's block?
I don't know. I wanted to have a really poetic answer there. I don't think I could think of one.
But you have a little bit of writer's block yourself, I guess.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, on the spot writer's block. I think it's really just a lack of inspiration, maybe, or lack of motivation is maybe a better way to put it. You're trying to write. You have the story. Or maybe you don't even have the story, but you want to pursue that exercise, that creativity, and there's nothing there. You try to go for a swim. There's no water. You want to go running. There's no track. Other metaphors, I'm sure there are, but for me, it's really that feeling that I don't really know where the writing is going. I sit down, I'm at my keyboard, and there's there's no connection, and I don't have, I write some words and it doesn't flow. It doesn't make sense. And I think for me, it just, it feels like I'm disconnected, like I'm separate from the writing, and I don't have that flow. I don't have that hold to it. And it's not a great feeling. I don't like it. I try to avoid it when I can, but
I think that's really well said, because I think there are more sides and more aspects to writer's block than most people realize. That,
mm,
like you said, it's not always you have the story and you don't know where to go with it. Sometimes you don't have the story at all. You just have the desire to write. Or sometimes you have
yeah,
the story and you have elements of the plot and you have things you need to write to, but for whatever reason, you just can't get your hands around what the story is or how to get to that point. So
yeah.
again, I think there's a lot more into the side of creativity when it comes to writing and when it comes to writer's block than people realize. And the reason I kind of wanted to talk about that and talk about what even is writer's block is I just saw the new Nosferatu movie, which I just realized we
Mm.
haven't yet talked about. Maybe that'll have to be
We
a
have not.
separate, level of the Patreon that doesn't yet exist.
Yeah.
But there's a point in the movie where Willem Dafoe's character says something along the lines of, in order to defeat evil, you have to admit that it exists. And it's
Mm.
like you have to put a face to something before you can vanquish it. If you're going to
Sure.
if you're being affected by writer's block, if you want to try to tackle it and deal with it, I think you got to acknowledge first what it is and what it looks like for you and what it's
Mm.
doing to your writing. So, and then have you ever experienced writer's block? And if so, what did it look like for you?
Yeah, I absolutely have. I think that's also a very, very poignant way to put it. And I think that applies to a lot of other things in life as well. Overcoming grief and sadness and just hardships in life. Uh, it's good to kind of address those things. So I think that's, first of all, just to say that I think that line from that movie is really poetic and makes a lot of sense. But for me, yeah, like I said, I think it's just a disconnect with the page, and even a blank page or a page where I have 50,000 words previously in the story and I've been writing consistently. Sometimes there's just, for whatever reason, I don't have that meld. I don't have that blend with the story. And it's weird because I don't think I don't, when it's time to go for a writing session, I don't feel like, okay, I have writer's block and I'm going to go into the session. I already have it. It's like, it just kind of comes on you when you sit down. And it's like, I've got time to write. Oh, here it is. I don't have, and I don't know. Sometimes it's like, I'm disinterested maybe, or apathetic to the process itself. And like you mentioned, yeah, it's kind of different sometimes, all the time. Sometimes it's not always the same thing to pin down, and I can go, oh, this is exactly what this is. Sometimes it's just a feeling, and it's maybe it's doubt, maybe it's you look at what you've written the day before and you didn't like the way it sounds, and so then that kind of soils your mood.
Hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, it's different on the day, I think. What is it for you, Josiah? What do you think? Have you felt it, I guess, first of all, to match the question, and then, yeah, what does it look like?
No, I'm a kind of a beacon of productivity. No, I'm just kidding.
I like that.
Nope. I have just come out of a months long period of writer's block where I didn't
Mm,
write a word. I mean, and I've had bursts of productivity since I've been writing, but I think, over those past 3 years, if you put it all together, I think I've had maybe like 8 months of actual true productivity if you were to put it all together. So it's definitely something I've experienced a lot. And it's, again, something that I'm really freshly coming out of a very fresh bout. And for me, yeah, I think you kind of started to talk about this, and I want to dig into this more later as we start to talk about how do we break it. But I
mm,
think there's an aspect of identity to it
mm,
when it comes to thinking about yourself as a writer and thinking about, man, do I have another novel in me? Do I have another short story in me? And maybe those are some of the questions that start to come after you hit the writer's block. But for me, that's some of the stuff that I come to the table with is, oh man, what if I don't have any more stories in me? What if I've already told everything I have to say? And I don't have any unique ways to say anything else, or I don't have anything else to say. So there's definitely an identity aspect. I think part of it is also procrastination.
mm.
Just I know
Yeah.
exactly what I want to. I got a list in my phone full of ideas that I think are really cool, but either I tell myself I don't have the time to really flesh that out right now. I got to wait till I'm a full-time writer, or I don't know that I have the life experience, or I don't know that I have all the elements to the idea to make it actually come to life. I think there's an aspect perhaps of laziness too, of like
Mm.
making yourself sit down, making yourself write, even if you're not, quote unquote, feeling it. I think
Yeah.
there's another aspect of you and I are both pantsers when it comes to writing. Just a quick side note for those of you who may not know that
Yeah.
terminology. When it comes to writing, there are two basic schools. There are pantsers, that comes from the seat of the pants, meaning you're sitting down, you're writing, you're not necessarily planning every plot point, you're not planning what's to come. You're more kind of just going by as you're feeling it, as you're seeing it. And then there are
Yeah.
plotters who, again, plot out to some extent the entirety of the story. You know where you're going, you know what points you're hitting in between. And so being a pantser, it can sometimes feel almost disingenuous to sit down and just write something. You know,
Hmm.
it almost feels like you're forcing the creativity. Like, okay, I'm not feeling it. I don't see it in my head yet, so I don't want to write anything. And so
Yeah.
that's a kind of writer's block that I think is self imposed that I've definitely experienced and had to push through myself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great, and I wonder if we put those labels on ourselves, like, um, somebody who's like for us, if we say we're pantsers, then yeah, does that mean that that's the only way that we can write, or is that the primary way that we write? You know,
Mm,
um,
yeah.
and yeah, I think too that you know being in the space that we're both in, which is aspiring authors, unpublished in a massive sense, or not even in a massive sense, but in a sense where we could only be writers. Um, yeah, at least for me, I feel like yeah, there's some level of like, okay, is this actually a real thing, or are you just kind of messing around with this hobby? And those aren't productive thoughts. And you can be aware that those aren't productive thoughts, but in the moment,
Mm.
I think yeah, some of that doubt, like you mentioned, yeah, I think that definitely plays into it, which can be, it can give us that block of, well, I don't want to write something bad because I'm maybe not even really a writer at all, and then you don't put anything on the page, and
Right.
then you don't have any story.
Yeah, I think there's a large aspect to it that sometimes, you think about a block in the road, right? A writer's block. You think about
Mm.
the phrase literally, it's a block. It's something that's stopping you from getting to where you want to go.
Yeah.
So I think step one, having the desire alone, I think that's a big thing that a lot of people don't give themselves enough credit for. That, okay, if
Mm.
there's a writer's block, there's something in your way stopping you from getting to what you want to get to. So I think just recognizing, hey, if you're facing writer's block, that means that you want to be writing. You have a story that you want to tell. So I
That's a
think
great
it's
point.
going back. Sometimes you have to go back to the roots and go back to the basics and say, hey, there's something I'm passionate about. There's something I'm excited about. And just recognize that, name that, because that's a cool, powerful thing to recognize. I have something to say, and there's something stopping me right now, but I have something to say, and I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna figure out a way to say it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good way to look at it, because yeah, it is motion. Even
Mm,
because there's the one aspect would be not even seeing the writer's block, because you're not even attempting, you're not even trying to sit down at the keyboard, you're not even thinking about the story, you're so removed from it because you either yeah are procrastinating to that such of an nth degree, or you're just completely separate from the process, that you don't even get to the writer's block. But to get to the place where yeah, there's this thing, there's a fallen tree in the road, well, that means you left your house, you had to get in your
mm,
car and drive. So you
mm.
were making an effort to do something, to have an action. So I think that's a very good point to kind of give yourself some of that confidence, maybe to remove a little bit of that doubt and say, I started making this step. I'm at this place where I can assess the damage, I can assess the problem in front of me, and now it's just to figuring out how to overcome that thing. I think that's probably the next step in the process.
Right, absolutely. So yeah, I think starting to dive into that side of things. So writer's block, it's a thing. I think almost all writers suffer from it. All the greats have suffered from it. Stephen King, he's definitely talked
Yeah.
about having periods of writer's block. Um, I've heard many authors talk about that. So we've all it's a common experience. Don't feel like you're alone if you're facing that, if you faced that before. So how
Mm.
do you begin to break it? Do you think that's something that it can be broken, or you just have to wait for the inspiration to strike, or what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I kind of think that I have to believe that it can be broken, because um, it's like I don't know that I don't know that I could survive and just go, well, it is what it is, because then maybe I would never. what if I hit a period of writer's block that's so bad? Like, let's say I get to a place where I'm published, I have a following, and I have worked out there, and I'm providing for my family off of this. Um, I couldn't be allowed to just go years without me just like suffering for this writer. Like I would have to write myself out of it. I think that's the only solution because I'd have people relying on me. You know, it's the same as my day job. If I go to work and I'm not feeling it, and it's like this is, I can't. You can't not feel it. There's some level of that where it's like you have to go to work. You still have to do this thing because there's people relying on you. Yourself, if you don't have anybody relying on you, yourself is relying on you. You know, that's somebody right there. That's the first line of reliance. And so I think thinking of it like that, I would have to believe that you can figure out a way to get out of the writer's block. And I think for me, the solution has always just been to write, to force something to happen. If I'm writing a story, I don't like where it is that day, I'll open a new document or I'll look at a list of other ideas that I have, and I'll just pick something and I'll just write some words. And some words gets me out of it. Or even I've played like word, what are those games where you try to figure out how fast you can type or whatever, like word typing games. Yeah. Sometimes that works because it's just my fingers have typed for how many years, And so if I can just get that motion where I'm consistently going fast and I'm hitting my rhythm, that can maybe kickstart something, and I can fire some neurons or something. And there's a little bit of a little bit of emotion to things. And so some of those tricks, I think have worked for me, but I think the big thing is just to try to write something, and then, just kind of force it and believe that it's a first draft usually, and it doesn't all have to be pretty. And maybe there's a scene later on that I'm more interested in. I can just skip ahead and write that scene. I've done that before. But I'm convinced that the solution is to just write something, and maybe it'll become something that day, and maybe it won't. But at least you'll maintain some of that consistency and some of that momentum. And I think the writer's block will be broken down. That's for me. That's what works for me. What for you, Josiah? What is your thoughts on the solution to the problem?
Yeah, no, that's so good. I think that is, you hear it all the time. It's a cliche at this point, but it's so true that consistency is key. And I found for me, again, coming out of this period of horrible writer's block, what first kicked me out of it was trying to write a specific story for a specific podcast. One of my few publication credits at this point is being on Full Body Chills. I wrote a short story for that. It got published, and every year, basically, they kind of reach out to authors who have written for them before and say, hey, we've got this new theme coming up for next year. Do you have any ideas, anything you want to throw our way? And so, I wasn't writing at all. I was sitting down at the computer every day and just staring at that horrible blinking cursor. And it just kind of sparked something. They gave the theme, the idea, and I was like, what if? And so it was that excitement, but it was also the deadline that I knew that soon they were going to be opening it up to the general public, to anybody who wanted to submit. And so it was one, an idea I was excited about, and two, a deadline that I had to meet. And again, I think that goes right back to consistency, as I was forced to sit down and actually write something. I was no longer under no restrictions of just write as you feel and write as you want. I had deadlines, I had restrictions, I had guidelines keeping me in place to keep me consistent to finish that story. And then from there, this was maybe very beginning of December. And then this year I started the 1K a day challenge for myself, where I sit down and I will not leave my desk until I finish writing 1,000 words.
That's awesome.
For some people in this podcast realm, that's not a lot, because some people in this podcast realm have written 4,000 words a day for a challenge, which is still blows my mind. But anyway, 1K a day was a nice, it was a big challenge for me. And just the consistency, once again, has been working wonders. Because again, as a pantser, I think in my mind, there's almost this like hyper spiritual element of like a story as a found thing, and I must find the inspiration. Like I must wait for the inspiration. I don't want to try to force creativity, because then the story isn't being true to its authentic self. It's almost like very new agey kind of an idea. When I'm finding, as I sit down and write, and just force myself to put words on the page about this story idea, about the characters, I'm finding that it blossoms on its own. As I was thinking about it, I'm kind of doing a daily video for TikTok, one, to hold myself accountable, and two, to, if it survives past January 19th, which is up in the air. Yeah. If it survives, I'd like to try to grow a following there. I think that's an effective place. And we'll talk about some of that next week when we talk about marketing and social media and all that. But,
Yeah.
I'm doing a video every day, and I was thinking about how sometimes when you're a pantser and you view the story as a found thing, it's like you come upon a path in the woods and you're following this path in the woods. It's beautiful. You see beautiful things all around you. And then you come to a section that's full of bramble and brush, and the light isn't great. And so you wait and say, well, maybe the sun will change. Maybe the clouds will move. Maybe some animals will burrow through and I'll begin to kind of see the path. So you have the two options. You can wait for all the circumstances to be perfect, for the light to hit it just right, for things to be, to clear themselves up, or you can take out a machete and you can chop your way through it and recognize that, yes, I may kind of hit a wrong path. I may go off a little bit, but I can always backtrack, right? Like you said this earlier.
Right.
I think that's so good, is that this is a first draft. It's a first draft for a reason. There's going to be at least 2 or 3 more if this thing's going to be published. So it's like, I have 2 choices. I can sit and wait for inspiration to strike, or I can make something happen. And I think for me, I've been finding to break that writer's block, to have good writing, is just be consistent. Just do it.
Yeah, I think that's all. Everything you said is spot on. I think we should do a little plug. You mentioned that Full Body Chills podcast. Where can people find your episode of that, where they read and sort of dramatize your story?
Oh yeah. So you can just look on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. Look up Full Body Chills. It's season 6. It's somewhere right in the middle of the season. It's a story called Staying Inside, which is still to this day one of my favorite stories.
Very nice.
Nice.
It's very cool. It's very good. Yeah, it's a great story, and it sounds excellent on the podcast.
Yeah, they do an awesome job. I mean,
so
the podcast is more than worth listening to. Beyond my episode, is really well done. Really spooky stuff there.
Yeah, but yeah. So then I would say to your point about like 1,000 words a day, that challenge, keeping yourself accountable. Yeah, I think that's such a great way to do things. Doing something every day. It's a little bit every day. It's like not, there's all these cliches, right? Rome wasn't built in a day. If you take a stack of paper and you stack it one on top of each other, eventually you'll have this tall enough stack. And all these, like, there's a bunch of different metaphors. I'm probably butchering them, but it's I think sometimes for myself, I can look at something and go, okay, here's kind of the word count goal for this story. And in fantasy, usually that can be a big chunk. You can have these 200, 300,000 word novels. And it's like, that's like, how long is that going to take me? And I like to kind of compartmentalize and break stuff down. And it's like, okay, well, if I want to do this in 6 months, that's going to be how many words per day, yada, yada. And you can look at the project is just too big. It's like, I don't know that I'm going to be able to get there. That's going to be so many, but really the solution is like, it's just a little bit at a time, 1,000 words a day, 2,000 words a day, whatever that is for whoever, 500 words a day. Just something that you have that momentum, that consistency. Because I think one of your TikToks you mentioned, like, or maybe even on Threads, but you were like 7,000 words. Like, that's a big number. That's a big number. That's a big chunk of words that you didn't have before that. And if you wouldn't have committed to doing this 1,000 words, you wouldn't have 7,000 words. And so I think that's so important to be able to just break it down and go, okay, this is the thing for the day. This is the task for the day. And yeah, it's the consistency. That's everything. It's just getting that start and doing a little bit at a time consistently, a little bit at a time over a long period of time.
That's good. That is so good. Yeah. Just again, do something. If you can boil it down, you got to just sit down, you got to do something. And that's not to trivialize that, once again, just to highlight this, we didn't talk about this actually earlier, you and I, we each have wives, we each have full-time jobs, we each have family to keep up with. You've got a son who's 2 years old, which is a lot. That's a handful. So it's like, not to trivialize, we all have a lot of stuff going on. Even if you are a full-time writer, I'm sure there are appearances, there's marketing that you still have a hand in. There's all this stuff going on that there are always going to be excuses not to write. But again, I think if writer's block is a problem for you, then that means that you want to write, you have the desire to write, Means you're a writer. Sit down and do it. Sit down and make it
Yeah.
happen. Even if it's only 5 words, even if it's only,
Yeah. Yep.
I read a fantastic piece of flash fiction, and it was 100 words long, but it was a compact, really good story. It was Hannah Rebecca Graves. You can find her on Threads, TikTok. Sign up for her newsletter because it's incredible. She'll send you little short stories and stuff like that. But again, it was like 100 words. And now, again, I'm sure she sat down and worked on that. She edited it. She did drafts.
Yeah.
But at the same time, remember that that's a possibility. You don't have to write a novel every time you sit down. Not every
Right.
project has to be, 140,000 word epic. Like you
Right.
can sit down and
Absolutely.
do a short story. You can sit down and do, what's the classic one? Baby shoes or free baby shoes, never used, right? The
Yeah.
three
Yeah.
sentence,
Yeah.
6 word short story, whatever it is. And that's a
Right.
powerful, poignant story, and it's a few words long. And it's something you
Yep.
could sit down and just come up with an idea, write down an idea that you have, write down a what if, a question that you have. But sit down, be productive, do something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It just has to be something. And you mentioned that like 6 word horror story that for some reason made me think of like the only 2 word verse in the Bible, which is Jesus wept.
Mm,
That holds so much weight.
powerful.
It's
Yeah,
2 words, you know?
right.
And it's like, if that's obviously none of us are writing the Bible, but if all you're writing is something small every day, you're going to find that gold. You're going to find those things that stand out. And if that's part of something bigger and you can look back and go, oh yeah, I remember that one day when I had really bad writer's block, but I wrote that one sentence and that
Mm,
sentence stands out and means something. Um, or if it's garbage and you write something that's really bad, well, then that is a little bit less garbage in your brain, and now you can write something better. If you think, like there's a limit to how much goodness and badness of in our brains. So we do need to get some of that crap out of there. So I don't
right.
know, maybe there's something to that as well. Um,
That's good. That's really good. That's so good. Something to be proud of, right? Just get something down. If it's
yeah,
bad, then like you said, now you got more room.
yeah, exactly.
Better out than
Yeah,
in, as they say. But if you
yeah,
write
that's
something,
right.
even 2 words, right? If you write something, that's also something you can be proud of and you can
Yes,
encourage yourself with and you can go back to and say, I can do that again, you know?
yes,
But you can't do that unless you write something.
yep, yeah,
That's the final thing I kind of wanted to dive into here is identity. When it comes to identity, I think that can be a big part of writer's block. Because again, I
mm,
think it's you sometimes think of yourself as, am I just a one novel guy? Am I just do I have anything more in me? And it starts to become less about what can I do and more about who am I? Am I a
mm,
writer? Am I able to do this? I remember there's a short story by Stephen King called and it's about this guy who gets this Kindle and he can look throughout all the literature of history in all the parallel universes available. He's an English teacher. He's always wanted to write a novel. He has this idea. And so he's searching through. He finds Ernest Hemingway. He finds all the works, of course, from this universe, but then he finds like in another parallel universe, Ernest Hemingway writes 50 extra stories. And so he's combing through and he finally gets this idea. What about myself? So he searches
mm,
himself in the archive to see if he published anything, and he finds ultimately that he did not publish anything in any parallel universe.
mm.
And I think he kind of accepts it, and he's
That's
like, "Oh well, wasn't meant to be." I know I couldn't do that.
yeah.
So, and then what role do you think the way that you view yourself as a writer? What role do you think that has maybe in writer's block and overcoming writer's block?
I don't know that I can answer that. That was such a that little short story that you just synopsed from Stephen King. That's
Synopsis.
completely struck. That completely struck me. I've Wow, that's really cool. I should read that.
But by the
Um,
way, that's from my favorite collection from him, Bazaar of Bad Dreams.
mm.
Fantastic collection. There's a story in there called Dunes that has my favorite ending of all time, maybe of any story. But
Oh,
anyway,
okay.
that's where you can find the story. Definitely read that.
All right. All right. I'll have to find that one. Yeah, I think for identity, I've been thinking about that a lot actually. Like, what is, and maybe it's not exactly the same conversation, but I think like, what is my goal in writing? What is like, why am I doing this? Beyond just the liking books and the dream of it being my career, and that would mean having making some money off of it and enough money to provide for my family and myself. Um, you know, do I have some like obligation to make art to better the world? Do I think of myself that highly? Do I think, I owe God like a debt? He gave me an ability. I should return it back to him.
Hmm.
Are those thoughts too high and mighty, or is it just enough to write fiction that is entertaining? And I would say new, but I don't really think there's a whole lot new. It's just different, and has a different take on things. Um, and so I'm still trying to figure that out, I guess. And maybe that's like kind of a more of a purpose conversation. Um,
Hmm.
but I think I want to. I want to write stuff that the books that stand out to me the most are the ones that stick with me, the ones that I think about, that are have something to say and have questions to ask, and that has been in a variety of genres. We talk about Stephen King. I still think about some of his books. Just I don't know if I'd say on the daily, but weekly for sure. And the story will come into my head because they are impactful. And the same with some fantasy books and some science fiction for sure. Um, Ray Bradbury has a lot of books that I still think about because they mean something, and I think that
Hmm.
that holds whether it was written in the 40s or whether it was written in the 2020s. And so maybe that's my hope in my identity is something that I guess lasts, that makes people think, and so
Hmm.
writing something that has some meaning to it that sticks with people, I guess, um, and is a little bit more than just entertainment. But that also sounds a little pretentious in saying that. So, but then maybe that's my self doubt,
Hmm.
fighting against and calling out as pretentious. I don't know.
Right.
I need
Why not?
I
Why
need
not
it.
you, and then Shepard? Why not you? Why
Yeah,
can't you be the person? You know?
sure. Yeah, we'll find out, I guess.
Yeah.
I have to
Well,
do the work
hey,
first.
genuinely, genuinely, I read the very first thing I read by N. Shepard was a short story called Island Man. And when I tell you that I still think about that story still has an impact on me. Um, man, that was a fantastic story. Very short story, under 5,000 words, right?
Yeah, it's not that long. It's pretty short. It's pretty self-contained.
Pretty short, and man, so good. I mean, that's one of my favorite short stories of all times. I'm working on a short story collection right now, and I am like so tempted to ask you for permission to throw it in there because it's that good. And if it's but anyway, yeah, I
Thank
think
you.
everything you just said is so good and so important, and it's true. Thinking about purpose can not only help you kind of shore up that identity as a writer, but also
Mm,
can help you get through those times of writer's block. Like, hey, whether it be I believe I have a God given purpose, whether it be I just want to entertain people and get people out of their misery and their sadness
yeah.
for a little while, whether it be I just want to clear the stuff out of my head and see what it looks like when I take it out. Keeping
Mm,
purpose before you can help you to figure out, how do I get past this writer's block? How do I set something down on the page that's worth setting down on a page? You know?
that's really good.
Um, any final thoughts?
I don't think so. I think this is gonna be a lot of fun. I think we're gonna have some good conversations, hopefully,
Awesome.
upcoming, and just talk about some cool things, and ultimately talk about books and writing. And
Yeah.
we'll, try to be consistent. We can't harp about consistency and then just put out one episode every 3 or 4 months. That wouldn't be
Yeah,
very
let's
on
scrap this
brand. So
episode. Let's do another one where we don't.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Well, N. Shepard, the horizons are bright. Uh,
Mm.
let's end with this. What are you reading and writing, and where can people find you?
I'm currently reading a book about writing. I think it's called On Writing by C.S. Lewis, and it's not. I guess it's not technically by C.S. Lewis. It's a collection of letters that he wrote and some, I guess, articles that he wrote, bits of pieces of some of those about writing, in just a variety of different ways. And so it's very short. I'll probably finish it tomorrow, but it's very interesting. And so try to hone the craft a little bit.
Hmm.
I am currently working on a epic fantasy novel that I am trying to figure out still a little bit. I tried writing it in the entirety of I tried writing the entirety of it in the month of December, and I failed a little bit over the Christmas holiday. So we're picking up the pieces on that a little bit, and should have it done by the end of the month, and then maybe throw a couple other things in the process while I'm there before we end January. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. How about you, Josiah?
I am currently reading. I just picked up yesterday, as of this recording, Clay McLeod Chapman, who is one of my all-time favorite authors, just released a new novel called Wake Up and Open Your Eyes. So just started
Nice.
that this morning, and then during the day, as I drive around for work, I'm listening to the audiobook of a book called Suffer the Children, which is
Mm.
fascinating, a fascinating read. In terms of what
It's a
I'm
great
working
title.
on, yeah, it's really good. It's really good. It lives up. Uh,
Okay, cool.
in terms of writing, I am, for my challenge, my 1K a day challenge, I am working on a horror novel about urban exploration, which is going in and exploring abandoned buildings, abandoned parks, whatever, abandoned places. And I don't want to
I
say too
like it.
much more yet, but man, I am excited. It's going
Nice.
really well.
That's very cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome to hear.
And then, where can we find you?
I have a YouTube channel. It is my name, NN Shepherd. I've got a website, nnshepard.com, and you can read. Actually, I think I've got two of my short stories are up there, and then I've got like 20, the first 20 days, so about what is that, 80,000 words of my novel that I've been working on is on there as well. And I've got a TikTok as well, which is also just my name, NN Shepherd. And those are kind of the main places that I put stuff out. So
Cool.
that's what I got. Josiah, where are you at?
Sweet. I would say I'm most active on Threads, and there I'm at Josiah Furcinitti. I'm considering taking up a pen name because no one's going to be able to spell that. But at Josiah Furcinitti on Threads, author Josiah Furcinitti on Instagram, Josiah Furcinitti author on TikTok. All confusing, but you can find it all on my website, josiahfurcinitti.com.
Very nice.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for the Right Word podcast, and we will see you next time.